So today's event is co-hosted by Distraction Free Schools California and Schools Beyond Screens. My name's Kate Brody, and I'm a writer, educator, and LAUSD parent. I'm going to be representing SBS today. Schools Beyond Screens is a grassroots organization aimed at promoting common sense tech reforms in LAUSD schools. And so we just support research-based approach to educational technology and classroom learning, and we are staffed 100% by parent and educator volunteers. And Jodi, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jodi Carreon. I'm the mother of two kids in public school, and I'm also the co-lead of Distraction Free Schools California, which is a coalition of parents, educators, and medical professionals advocating for legislative action and policy change to address the overuse of smartphones and student-facing ed tech within our schools. Excited for the discussion.
Great. And today our guest is Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath, the author of The Digital Delusion, which I hope some of you were able to read in advance, but we'll
Yay.
discuss it either way. And The Digital Delusion, How Classroom Technology Harms Our Kids' Learning and How to Help Them Thrive Again. We're going to dig into that shortly. Jared's a teacher turned neuroscientist who specializes in human learning and development. He has conducted research and lectured at Harvard University, Harvard Medical School, University of Melbourne, and schools around the world. In The Digital Delusion, he explores how EdTech has undermined learning, the biological mechanisms for why that is, and what we can do to help students succeed once more. Thanks for joining us, Jared.
No, thank you guys. This is going to be awesome. Thank you for having me.
So I thought before we get into the nitty-gritty, because there's a lot of little pockets of the book that I want to explore around EdTech and AI and all these other concerns, but maybe
Yeah.
we can zoom out first. Because I think even parents who are really involved in their kids' education often don't have a great sense of what the day-to-day looks like in the classroom. It's kind of a black box, right? Like you drop them off and you assume it's basically what you remember from first grade. But you've been studying learning and education. You've been paying attention to the trends over the last couple decades. Where are
Yeah.
we at right now with technology in the classroom, and how did we get here?
And we are at an absolutely gobsmacking level. Basically, in the US right now, over 88% of public school districts now have one-to-one computing programs for kids. So you can assume in those districts, kids will touch their computers basically every single day. And now, amongst those kids who use their computers, we typically say over half use them between 1 to 4 hours a day, with over a quarter using them over 4 hours a day. That is at school. Now, that might be all well and good if they were actually using the computers for learning. But it turns out the vast majority of that time, over half of that time, we estimate they're going to be off task. So even though they have a teacher in the room telling them we need to do X, they will just veer and do whatever the heck they want to do. So it's just killing learning time there. And if you ask how did we get there, gosh, it sucks. I don't want to sound cynical, but how could you not? Money. How else do we get anywhere when it comes to education? It can't be data. No one ever did research on any of these tools. So the only reason it came in is because someone got rich off of it.
So maybe that's a good place to kind of jump in. In the book, you talk about the five myths, these sort of lies that were sold to us that allowed technology to come into the classroom. Um,
Yeah.
and I thought maybe we could get into some of those because you say basically the first one being education is broken, second one being multimedia enhances learning, free choice leads to better learning,
Yeah.
kids learn best on their own, and intelligent tutors make kids more intelligent. And I
Mm.
think all of these we hear they're all still kind of percolating. The idea of free choice leading to better learning is so baked into what LAUSD is doing right now with
Yeah.
personalized learning, which you also address. So maybe you could just touch on that real quick, how these myths kind of took hold and how pernicious they've become.
Dude, it's gonna sound totally flippant, but I blame TED Talks. Is if you think about it, TED Talks really start getting big in 2006, and if you go back from 2006 to about 2010, any TED Talk that addresses education at any level will say that it's broken, it's not suit for purpose, the kids are bored, they're struggling, which is always hilarious to me because guess when peak schooling was? Right around 2006 to 2010. Not only was school not broken, we were doing better than arguably we had ever done in history at that point. We were killing it. More kids had access to it. More kids were succeeding through it. We were focusing on well-being more than at any other time before, until now when we've overdone that kind of pendulum swing, but neither here nor there. But it's people started selling these ideas and myths. Why? Because they had something to sell us, which was a product. Now, it's real hard to sell a product, a solution, if you don't have a problem. So they genuinely had to manufacture a problem playing on our emotions. So as adults, most of us think back and we didn't like school. And a lot of that, believe it or not, is going to come from our culture and society. Like a lot of, I was just talking with someone yesterday, huge player in this field. He's like, yeah, school's boring though, because teachers just talk to kids. I'm like, no, that was called Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That was a satire. No teacher has ever actually done that. You get that, right? But that's in our head what's actually happening in schools. So my wife is a perfect example. She hated school. She married me. Oops. And I just kept saying, just go to a school. Just see what we're actually doing. You're gonna. So finally, one day she came to school with me. She's like, this is great. Why wasn't this what school was like when I was at school? I said, it was. You just don't remember it.
For
It
sure.
it absolutely was. We did not have anyone just talk to us for 50 minutes while we looked at a book. There was so much give and take, and all that stuff was working great. But if you want to sell a new tool into a system that's already working great, you have to pretend that that system is broken. So they come in with all these ideas. Like, so if you take a look at like learners are best at choosing their own paths. No, human beings are really, really good at knowing what feels good for learning. Unfortunately, we're really bad at knowing what is good for learning. So when you give kids pure autonomy over the choices of how they get information in and the techniques they usually pick the path of least resistance, what feels good for them. And the problem with that is not only do they not learn, but their confidence goes through the roof because they think they're learning so much more. It's the kids who are struggling, going through the really hard pedagogy, who, when you ask them, are you confident? Do you think you're learning? Most of them say no, but when you actually test them, they're learning way more than everyone else. So I always kind of liken it. You go to the gym, you let me pick what I do at the gym, that stair stepper's going on too. I'm gonna feel real good. And you're gonna say, did you work out? I say, hell yeah, I did. Now you have somebody actually make a workout regime for me. I'm going to hate it. I'm going to huff and puff, but that huff and puff is exactly what you need. And then that's going to bleed over too to this idea that I think we've made this mistake. And I know a lot of ed tech people have made this mistake. We look at how, like, I have a 3-year-old daughter. You say something once, she will remember it forever. Yeah, you crack a lewd joke because when I'm not paying attention, I might say a word here or there. Congratulations, you can hear her say that for the next year. It's like, oh, dang it. Why? Because from birth to 5, the brain is in a very specific mode where it's just in input mode. It takes in everything. If you have a 5-year-old kid, they have 50% more brain than you do. Their brain is in a specific mode where all it is input. Every sound, every smell, everything they see will get baked into their brain. Right around 5, 6, that's when the brain is going to flip. It's going to pull back a bunch of synapses, and all those memories you made before the age of 5, they're going to become, don't worry about the details. They're going to become what we call semantic memories. You are no longer going to be able to access them, but they will guide every bit of learning you do past that stage. So that's why we don't remember anything from our childhood, really. But all of that was important to who we are today. Once you hit age 5, now you hit what we call adult cognitive learning. So from 5 till the day you die, you're in a different learning mode. And there's only 2 ways to learn now. One, instruction, have somebody guide you and show you what to do, or 2, trial and error. Trial and error works, and there are some times when I absolutely want to use it. But my goodness, in something like math, where it took us 1,200 years to figure out that 0 was actually a digit, do you really think trial and error is the right way to go about that structured learning? Or no, that's when you say, cool, direct guided instruction is now what we have. And that's what schools have always done. So to try and eliminate that one aspect of schooling and say kids can do it on their own, they're going to be fine. You're basically throwing them into trial and error mode, and they have to reinvent math. And every single kid has to reinvent reading. Why? We know how to do it. Why don't you let me teach it to you in a very rapid time? And now you can take off from where we've left off, as opposed to
Mhm.
starting from scratch every time we get a new kid. Does that kind of make sense? I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
kind of.
totally. And these are just very, I mean, you get how the pitch is very sexy, right? Like you can
Hmm.
do all of this without any work. And I know at one point you write in the book, like there are no shortcuts, and that's a lot. I think that's not as sexy a message, right? That
No.
learning to read is hard, that it requires many parts of your brain and it will take years. And it is not something that's just going to happen, is a harder
Repetition, repetition,
message.
repetition. That's one of the biggest bugbear or like four-letter words in education now is repetition, but we don't realize that is the biological mechanism of learning. Anything biological, from plants to
Mhm.
animals to fish to viruses to bugs. Viruses may or may not be biological. I'm gonna lump them in right now. It's repetition. That is how biology changes. We eliminate that through ease. We eliminate friction and repetition. There's really nothing left for biology to do.
Yeah. I think also baked into some of these myths that we often hear is that ed tech is new, and it's going to revolutionize education. I think we heard it 10 years ago when we were moving towards one-to-one devices. We're hearing it again with AI in education. But I think you said
Yeah.
in your book, I'm going to get it wrong, but ed tech is the education revolution 50 years in the making. That we're still waiting for it to come, and that these technologies, these approaches actually aren't new. I think Audrey Waters wrote an entire book on it, The History of Teaching Machines. And I think there's this idea that
What are
it's
the
new,
odds
and
of that?
it's not. It's
Yes,
based on
indeed.
these similar ideas that haven't worked for decades. We think it's going to work now, and it doesn't.
Yeah, the very first teaching machine was built in 1922 by a guy named Sidney Pressey. He stopped doing it. It came back by in the 40s with B.F. Skinner. He quit. It came back at MIT in the 60s. They quit. Back in the 80s, they kind of quit, and then it just kind of we just keep cycling the same thing. And the question everyone asks is if it why did it not work in 1922? And it was the same reason why it's not working now. It's just incompatible with human biology and learning and what we hope to achieve by school-based learning. And if in 1929 Sidney Pressey quit and found that out, why do we have to keep finding that out again and again and again? And that's going to be the alpha school problem. The problem with alpha school and with online tutoring and all this stuff is exactly what he said in 1929 was wrong with his machine. Nothing is new under the sun. If you understand the mechanisms, then you can maybe hopefully stop doing that cycle again and again.
So you talked then, now that we've kind of established how we got here, the three intractable problems with ed tech is like one of the
Yeah.
early chapters in the book. And so the first two, I think, most of the people on this call are kind of plugged into this space, and we think a lot about the problems with attention. The empathy piece is so important, right? That you need to
Yeah.
have a teacher to have an almost like therapeutic relationship to motivate students.
Yeah.
The third piece I think is so interesting, and I was thinking about that, which is transfer. So we were talking yesterday among SBS members because the district put out this video boasting about the number of minutes students had read on their digital books app, which is called Sora. And it was this video of kids reading on screens. And the issue of transfer doesn't seem to be super well understood in the mainstream right now. So I was hoping you could
No.
talk about that, what the problem is with learning on devices and why that learning doesn't necessarily transfer off of those devices.
Absolutely. So there's two kind of levels of transfer. And to be fair, man, we could do 2 hours on transfer alone, but we're just going to keep it simple here. One is contextualization. So here's a story from an old textbook. I collect old textbooks. They're absolutely awesome to read. Read it. If you can find a textbook from like the 1800s, it's magic. They're so good. So this was from a physiology textbook from the 1850s, and it tells the story of this delivery man. So it's the 1850s. This delivery man's got this really expensive package he has to deliver, but it's noon, it's a little hot, it's dusty, so he decides I'm gonna go have a beer instead. I'll deliver this after this beer. He ends up having more than one beer. He drinks a little too much, passes out. The next day, he wakes up, he's sober, he's feeling fine, but guess what he lost the night before? That package. He doesn't know where the heck he put it. So he's walking around town trying to retrace his steps. The book said that by the end of the day, they had five of his bosses all looking for this thing. No one could find this package. Guess what they did to jog his memory?
Got him drunk.
Got him drunk. As
This is
soon
this
as
is
the
the
dude was
story of my
drunk,
Spanish. I can only speak Spanish when I'm a little drunk.
that is, I can only do Italian in my car. Put me in my car, I'm great. Put me in a restaurant, meh. And that's it. But that's it. This is where we learn that learning is highly contextual. So your memory for this session now isn't going to be my words. It's going to be my words mixed with the feeling of the chair against your body. Whatever temperature is in the air around you, other things you might be hearing or smelling. Go inside. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you tired? And all of this is going to get tied up with what you learn. and will ultimately determine how you can access and use that learning in the future. So I always say this is why military, when they train for combat, they don't do Call of Duty 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. They do high tension, high stress live ammo drills. Why? Because what's a war situation like? High tension, high stress live ammo. They build the context into the learning so they can more easily access that learning when they hit that context in the future. Bring this back to us now. The screen is a wickedly narrow context. It does not matter what you do. The keyboard and the layout of that screen will always remain exactly the same, which means anytime you're learning on a screen, that learning is becoming highly contextualized and narrowed to this small 1 inch thing in front of me with these keys here. And think of how absolutely non-varying it is. Like the keyboard, it doesn't matter how hard you press the letter K or how soft you do it or if you roll your finger, it always comes up exactly the same. So it's a wickedly narrow context that when you learn in it, your learning is going to start to become tied to that context. But wait a second, I hear people say, that knife is going to cut both ways. If I learn online, then my learning will be stuck online. I can't move it off. But if I learn offline, my learning will be stuck offline and I can't move it on. What do you say to that, big guy? Touche, I say. That brings us to the second part of transfer. It's called additive versus subtractive transfer. Sometimes when you need to move a skill into a new context, that new context will require you to do less than what you initially learned. You actually learned in a harder context than the performance. So think about it like this. If you grew up learning how to drive a manual transmission and I pop you in a car with an automatic transmission, man, you got to do less. So you're easy. That's an easy form of transfer. You can make that happen pretty quickly. But flip it. Sometimes when you move into a new context, you have to do more. The context is harder than what you initially learned in. We call that additive transfer. So if you learn to drive on an automatic, and then I put you in a 1977 Dodge Charger with a 3 on the tree, you have no clue what to do because you were never actually trained in that way. So that kind of transfer is basically impossible. Now bring it back to tech. Tech, by its very design, is easy. It's the easiest thing human beings ever made. When the iPhone came out, Steve Jobs flat out said, I said, design this so a baby could use it. And then we backtracked from there. Like people talk about AI and how we have to train kids on AI. You mean that box you type words into? Yeah, that's tricky as hell. We better devote a couple months to that. Man, I can't figure that out. This is as easy as you're ever going to get. The real world, by contrast, is so wickedly nuanced. Every time you do something in the real world, it will be subtly different. Just think of writing. If you're writing with a pencil, every letter you write is going to wear that pencil down a little differently. And now you're going to have to tweak your muscle movements even slightly as you're writing a single sentence. So the variation in the complexity of the real world means if you learn out here, you can bring it online wickedly easy. It takes maybe a week of practice and you're fine over here. But if you learn online the ease and frictionlessness with which online works, you are not trained for the difficulty in the nuance of the real world. You cannot bring your skills off. And so probably my favorite data about this, I just did crunch this one this morning, by the way. So LAUSD has iReady Tuesdays, right?
Some schools, yeah.
Yeah. So iReady. Okay. First and foremost, I've been able to find 4 research papers on iReady. 2 deal with diagnostics, so only 2 research papers, both of which say it doesn't really work. I have found 0 evidence that that is a meaningful tool to use. What happens? I just analyzed a whole ton of data from around the world looking at what happens when kids use computers for drilling and training and simulation. When they have to take a test off of that simulation, their scores drop wildly. So the only place you will see benefit of iReady is in iReady. So if you're using that program to prove that program's worth, it's going to look good. But just think about it. That's practice. If I practice juggling, I'm going to get better at juggling. If you now test me at bottle throwing, it's going to be a totally different game. You cannot use the tool to prove the tool. If a kid trains in the tool, we need to test them off the tool to see, are they moving those skills off? And what we're seeing by and large around the world is the answer is no. Now, to be fair, it doesn't mean they can't. It just means it ain't easy. And I think a lot of the times we think, oh, as long as you've read 50 hours on your Sora iPad, you're a good reader. Give that kid a book, see how they do. It's going to be a completely different ballgame. So we cannot use these because of the transfer issue. And go back to what I was talking about, Kate. That's what Sidney Pressey said in 1929. He said the reason why I quit making my teaching machine was because kids would do really good on the machine, but as soon as I asked them verbatim the exact same questions off the machine, they couldn't do anything anymore. And that's what happened with Skinner in the 40s. That's what happened with MIT in the 60s through the 80s. We just keep hitting that same transfer problem again and again. So the more we can recognize that, look, what do athletes do? They train in harder situations than they have to perform. That's kind of the point. They make it as hard on themselves as possible when they're training so that the game becomes easier. That's the same thing with learning. If we make learning easy and frictionless, kids aren't learning, they're just coasting. And now when they get in the real world, they can't do anything. But if school is hard, if school is rigorous, if school makes them sweat, cool. I want you to go to college and be like, man, this is easy. I over prepared for college. Exactly what I wanted to do. That's what I want to see from you.
And I think this is so important for, us as parents and our schools to understand that these companies are coming in with these big flashy presentations to our school and trying to sell a product. And a lot of the data that they present is, to your point, how students performed within the system. They showed this much growth from, this month to this month within the system. It's
Yeah.
not always being brought back to outside and standardized measures. And I think we need to recognize that and call that out when we see it.
And we can bring that back. I just took a look at your California's NAEP data. So your digital decusation point, just so let me bring this up. I've pinned at 2015 because what happened in 2015 was when smarter balanced online testing. So it was when computer-based statewide testing came in and it replaced the paper-based STAR CST system you guys had. So I say 2015, you're now digital. Anything before that, you're not digital. Looking at NAEP data from 1992 to today, your peak year, California's peak year in everything, fourth grade and eighth grade math, fourth grade and eighth grade reading was 2013, the year before you went digital. You had peak values on all of those years. Your guys' hands down worst values, 2024. You've been going downhill ever since. As soon as, and this is not just California, man, you pick any state you want, find their decusation point, and you will see from 1992 to the point when that state goes widely digital, the data is always going up. As soon as you hit digital, the data starts going down. And so California is the exact same thing. So think of how much money that state has invested in digital technology to lose ability. It's not just oh shucks, where else could that money have gone?
Right.
Like it's not just a zero or a free for all game out there. Those billions of dollars could have gone into teachers' pockets, could have gone into training, could have gone into curriculum. Now people are saying we don't have enough money to buy analog curricula. Well, yeah, because you spent it all on this crap. And now you're tied to that. So that's where I kind of get a little flustered. It's not neutral. It's not, oh, we're going down, the tool is bad. It's you also have the sunk cost thing where you actually blew a lot of opportunity to do other things as well.
hmm I think that's part of what makes it so hard to walk back, right? You have to admit
Yeah.
to this sort of cascade of failures, and harms, and then rethink how you're doing things and kind of, just not chase this sunk cost of
Just keep
technology.
throwing it down. We're already there.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I heard California by next year wants to go all digital curricula, which I said, man, if you want to do something cool, um, team up with with a pulp manufacturer, a paper place, get them to buy you a bucket load of printers and print your things out and show everyone that your school, you can still go analog even with digital curricula and you can still outperform everyone else by doing that. That's the only like it's we got to do something. But it's funny too. So like the government's saying, how do we go back to analog? It's already in place. If I drive a car and one day I decide, you know what, I'm going to get a motorcycle. And I drive that motorcycle for 10 years and I'm like, no, this is dangerous, guzzling gas, it's bad for the environment. I'm going back to my car. Cool, it's right there in my driveway. We never lost the infrastructure. We don't have to start from scratch. We have the infrastructures already in place for analog. All we're going to need to do is a little bit of money to get back into textbooks and stuff. Where do we get that money? You're looking at it. Any school that does an audit of tech, they are wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on programs no one is touching. So if
Mhm.
you just go through and say, what are the three LMS systems we have in our school? How many hardware components do we have in our school? What are the online training programs we have? I promise you, you will find about half of them are rarely, if ever, being touched by anyone. All you got to do is ditch that. Now you got your money. Off you go. It's all there. We just got to think a little bit about how we want to kind of maneuver around it.
Yeah.
Beyond that, we're also seeing a lot of schools talking about the costs associated with device repair. Fresno Unified has just announced that they're returning back to classroom sets because they're spending over $4 million a year on device repairs.
I'd save you. I'll give $400 a year on tape. There you go. Tape up that book. Go again.
So I wanted to in the this is I think the book is so helpfully structured because you have like the five myths, these three problems, then you have this sort of eight apologies. And as I was reading through it, we've seen every single one, right? So ed
Yeah.
tech has so much potential, it's always potential. We just need more time. You've already spoken to that. It's, this is going on a century now of like learning machines. Modern
Yeah.
students learn differently. People are using ed tech incorrectly. We hear a lot of that with AI lately. It's
Yeah.
just a tool. But the last three I'd love to get into because I think sometimes we hear pushback to our efforts that aren't really confrontational. Principals and teachers and parents who are really sympathetic. And it sounds something like, I hear you, I hate this stuff, but digital devices are ubiquitous. Kids need these skills to be competitive. We can't get left behind. One I hear a lot is I'm on a computer all day, which I'm never sure how that's relevant really. But but how do you respond to that kind of thing? Because I think that's where it feels like maybe there's room. People who don't love this stuff, but they feel that it's inevitable and that they have to just kind of give into the tide of it.
hmm
Where do
We
you come back to that?
saw how well that went down with social media. Well, every other kid is on it now. Yeah, look at the look at the response to that one. Um, all of that is fear-based and completely incorrect. So the best way to train your kid, if you're worried about your kid getting a job, the best way to train your kid is in general thinking. That way you don't have to predict what's coming down the path. So think about it. Like if 5 years ago you'd said, we need to prepare our kid for a job, what would you have told me they had to do? They have to learn how to code, they have to be on the internet. You didn't see AI coming down the path. Now you don't really have to code, you have to be able to apply code or play with coding. So far as I know, I don't really understand what the hell is going on with coding, but my guess is you now have to shift. So every time school tries to chase the trend of the moment, I can show you documents that said we need to teach kids Morse code, otherwise they will not be able to socialize. Well, shoot, how'd that look in the long run? If you try and predict the future or meet the present now and say, we got to hit this, you're always going to be wrong. So rather
Mhm.
than trying to figure out what skills do kids need for an unknowable future, I'll tell you what that skill is. They need adaptability through learning. And that is the one skill a general K through 12 education has always taught. We teach you how to think through knowledge in order to drive your own learning and solve problems. That's what we do. We're not teaching you history because I think you're going to become a historian. I'm teaching you how to think through knowledge so that you can adapt and maneuver to problems. We train on that. Tech, remember, tech is easy. It was built for a kid to use it. You don't need to train on the tool itself. You need to train in thinking so that when you use the tool, you can actually use it in a meaningful way. And that's where I think a lot of people make mistakes is millennials are more digitally literate than Gen Z, way more than Gen Alpha. Gen X is equivalent to Gen Z. If hiring managers are hiring for a tech position, they are 80% more likely to hire a millennial or a Gen Xer than a Gen Z. Why? Because these people were trained on tools. But when you train someone on a tool, they're good at a tool. They're not good at thinking. When you train someone to think, you're now good at every tool. It doesn't matter what you throw our way. I mean, think about AI, right? None of us were trained on AI, but everyone's like, oh, we need an AI curriculum. Why? Did any of us have any problem learning it? No, because our schools taught us how to think and learn. Now, when the world evolves, cool. So that's one of my big bugbears is when people, and this is why, if you can look at those eight apologies, I promise you, anything anyone says about education will fall into one of those apologies. And at
Mhm.
no point will they ever show you data. At no point will they ever talk about mechanisms. All of those apologies come from belief, from deep faith. And the problem with faith is it's real hard to crack. That's why, like, I had a debate with the Alpha School people. Didn't matter, man. I could spend 2 hours showing them how every word that comes out of their mouth is nonsense. But they're like, they just have these dumbass grins on their face, like, yeah, but it's gonna work someday. Your choice. Do you want to risk your kid's future on a bet from some Silicon Valley guy who has no clue what he's talking about, or do you want to talk about data and mechanisms? So yeah, yesterday somebody was talking about why do kids have to learn history? It's so they're never going to use that in the real world. It doesn't matter. That's not what we're doing. I
Yeah.
didn't play soccer because I was going to be a soccer player in the real world. I didn't learn the piano because I genuinely think I'm going to be. We are using these as conduits through which to develop our cognitive abilities. Now, as an adult, when you choose what path you want to go down, you're well versed to go down that path. So that's why, like this whole argument, we don't want to teach kids stuff, let them run around. You let kids choose their own curricula, you already know who's going to do what. The kid who likes films is going to do films. The kids who like horses are going to do horses. The kids who like football are going to do football. No one, when given free reign, especially as a kid, nobody extends themselves. We regress to that which we are already good at. The reason for it is it's a safety mechanism. That's the difference between chaos and creativity. Creativity requires structure. You want to see someone be creative and think outside the box? You better give them a box to think within first. Chaos, you want to just give people free reign to do anything? Without any structure, people regress. It is safer to go back to that which you know, and that's all you'll ever see of kids if you don't say, yeah, we're doing history, but I'm not going to be a historian. Don't care. That's not why we're doing it. We're going to do art, but I don't care about painting. Don't care. That's not why we're doing it. It's there's a structure to K through 12 that is beyond I'm just training you for work. It's I'm training you how to live, and that will translate into work, guaranteed.
It strikes me that there's something almost backward looking about the way that we've started to talk about K to 12 less as liberal arts and more as a vocational school all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It's pitched very much as like this is the way of the future, but it almost harkens back to like a 19th century, we're
Factory
training them for
model.
the mines, the apprenticeship, whatever. We've sort of
Yeah.
lost faith, I guess, in this liberal arts view that carried us through all the progress of the 20th century.
And we're paying the price for it. We've got the creativity drain. We've got lowest we've ever seen in terms of if you look at new patents, we're 97% lower in new patents now than we were 30 years ago. It's people just aren't doing anything anymore because
Yeah.
we're not trained to do things. We're trained to perform like the little monkeys, which to me says, and that's where people go, oh, isn't that what school was doing in the 90s? No, that's what you think school was doing, but that is genuinely what school is doing now. And Neil Postman nailed it. He said, look, if school was about getting kids jobs, then we're going about it the wrong way. The right way to get a job is not a general K through 12 education. It is a 2-year apprenticeship. And I promise you, you'll get a job and you'll perform at it better than anything else. So what then is the K through 12 for if it's not to get a job? It's got to be something bigger than that. And it's to teach us how to think so that they can stand on our shoulders rather than just continue to kind of cycle the world we're living in now.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it's so interesting. Even one of the leaders at Anthropic came
Mm.
out saying that the skills that she's looking for are not tech skills. They are human skills, those that are developed through the liberal arts and through humanities degrees, which is so
Yeah.
opposite of what they've been saying for the last 10 years.
And so, somebody's brought that up the other day. Like, we need an AI curriculum to train kids on AI. How do you train someone to use AI? You, here's a box, type words into that box. How do you train them to do that? You train them to type good stuff in there. And I'm not talking about prompt engineering. I'm talking about deep knowledge so that you have actual questions worth asking. Then maybe go and use this tool. But once you have enough deep knowledge, probably you won't use that tool because you realize, look, I know more than the tool does already. So off I that's my favorite. Everyone says like keep an eye out for this one because this one's coming down the pipe now. Is everyone is now saying, well, AI is just a baby. It's like a little baby. Of course, it's going to suck at most things, but it's only going to get better. That's like their new frame. Not a year ago, they were telling us it was at the level of a PhD student. So what is it, mate? Is it a baby growing, or is it my level? Because I can promise you, it ain't my level. So it's got to be something else. And that's once you realize just how poor. My wife didn't. My wife has never touched AI. She just found ChatGPT like last week, and she's like, "Man, this is really good." I'm like, "Yeah, you think so?" The reason why AI looks good is because we're not experts in everything. AI is basically good at just pulling the wool over your eyes and appearing as though it knows what it's doing. So I told my wife's a psychologist, I said, go ask it any meaningful question about psychology and watch what happens. And she's like, man, this thing is stupid. It doesn't even know the basics. I'm like, mm-hmm. It only looks smart when you're using it to do things you don't know. As soon as you use it to do something you're well versed in, you realize just how decrepit it is. And I promise you, it has always been that decrepit. You just weren't paying attention. We didn't know any better. If I use it to tell me about cars, sounds good to me. Anyone who knows about cars will be like, that's nonsense. So that's one of the big dangers of kids using it is they have no ability to vet what the hell it's doing. So they basically just take everything. It's like a worse copy and paste from Wikipedia. Then it's just a new version of that without them ever being able to think about what's actually happening or develop that expertise that would allow them to vet this machine. So all these skills, yeah, I'd rather teach my kid to think and then they can use tech to make thinking easier rather than use tech to avoid learning how to think.
Right.
So maybe then we could talk about, I wanted to address in the book, you talk about one of the most pernicious arguments in education right now is coming from the AI boosters who are saying something like AI will free students from lower order thinking so that they can devote all their time to higher order thinking.
Yeah.
Um, and in the book, you talk a little bit about why that's so kind of absurd as
Yeah.
an argument. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. So there's a psychologist out of the Netherlands. I was talking about this yesterday. We've been beating around this bush in psychology for decades. He finally just said it. He pulled the trigger and said, here, I'll say it. And everyone's like, finally, yay. What he said was long-term memory is the seat of all human cognition. That's it. Everything we can do as human beings, higher order creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, all springs from our long-term memory. What do we have in there will determine what we can do up here. And the reason for it largely is all these processes that we call higher order are largely, some people estimate 80 to 90% subconscious. It's not you actually solving a problem, it's your biology going through the process of organizing ideas to solve a problem for you. That's why if you go to bed with a problem, you'll wake up with a solution. If you get your best ideas in the shower when you're not actually thinking about stuff, when you let your biology get to work and do what it does. The problem is your biology, so your higher order cognition, it can't access the internet. It can't look up Google or AI for help. It's stuck only with what you have put in there, embedded within yourself. So the level of your creativity will always be limited by the level of the knowledge you have internalized. And that's why, so you probably read at some point that expertise kills creativity. That is very true in the short term. If we test an expert and a novice and we say you have 10 minutes to solve a problem, sometimes the novices comes up with more creative solutions than the expert. Why? Because the expert's going to just go with immediately what works. I've seen this 100 times. I know what's going on. You give them 24 hours plus, 100% of the time, the expert now is more creative than the novice because they just needed time to step away from the problem, let their biology get to work, come back to the problem, and then they go, here's 6 things that you didn't even think about. So expertise does not kill creativity. Deep knowledge does not kill creativity. The number one way to kill critical thinking, creativity, and you're witnessing it in the world right now. You want to kill critical thinking? Stop teaching kids stuff. Skip the tedium of learning things and try and jump right into engaging with the world. You skip that, you're going to be left with people who can't vet even the smallest of things. So all higher order thinking emerges from lower level knowledge. You skip that, there is nowhere else to go. And that argument, Kate, by the way, a professor out of UCL, Rose Luckin, she's been around forever. She has been so good in the field of learning. She is now making that argument. And it's like, I've never seen a group of people just drop her hotter than a hotcake. Like every other academic in the world's like, well, you're done. Like you can't say that because it's such nonsense. So she decided to go to bed with AI. She's getting funded by them now. And the rest of us are just like, nope, that's not true. And that's like a great example of someone saying it because they have a vested interest now in saying it, even though she knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's no truth in that statement.
It feels like some version of what we were talking about with ed tech before too, which is just that there are no shortcuts. Like in a weird way with learning, productivity is the opposite of learning. Like you want there to be that strain and that friction and the hard work and the sweat.
Yeah.
So there is no skipping to the end. There is no, you know,
Well, that's what John Hattie, so he's probably the biggest guy in the field of educational research, been doing this for, God, 60 years. That was his thing, is that I've played with data for 6 decades. I know everything about everything when it comes to teaching and learning and pedagogy. And he said, my number one thing I've learned is this: you can't shortcut learning.
mhm.
It just is. If you don't go through the hard yards, it doesn't happen. Now we can try and make that as nice as possible for you, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to always chug away at it.
Yeah.
There
Which
was
which is true
a
for sports.
interesting paper that was just released. I think it's in preprint, but it was announced at the Stanford AI Summit this week. And it was evaluating middle school students, and they separated them into middle school students who used AI and those who didn't. And then they did some creativity measures. And
Hmm.
while using creativity, those who use or in measuring creativity, those who used AI, their creative measures went up. But once that was removed, their creativity dropped by a measure of fourfold decrease.
There it
And
is.
the researcher said, it was really interesting. It was, partly the skill wasn't there, but even more than that, it was that the students' confidence had decreased. They didn't think they were as good as AI and weren't willing to try. And I think that's one of my big concerns with especially young students who are developing these skills and creative thought, that they're never going to consider themselves as good as the machine.
Oh my God, I got to look that up. You got to share that with me because it's what
Absolutely.
it is. That goes right back to calculators. When kids use calculators to learn math, they outperform kids who don't use calculators to learn math, so long as they have a calculator. As soon as you take it away, they drop precipitously because they don't genuinely know what they were doing. So basically, what you've just done is you've tied their entire life to that machine if you ever want them to perform. Now, who benefits from that? Cui bono? When you tie kids to AI or a computer and say for the rest of your life, if you ever want to do anything creative, you're going to have to do it through this machine. Who benefits from that? Now, do you know why there's an arms race to get this younger and younger and younger? The biggest battle right now in Silicon Valley that no one is talking about is who can get computers into pre-K faster. Is it going to be Apple or is it going to be Microsoft? Because whoever gets there, congratulations, you have customers for life. It's not even like just watch Zuckerberg. They don't even hide this shit anymore. They're flat out telling us they don't care about learning. They don't care about development. They care about customer base. And the easiest way to get customers is to hook you on my tool fast so that for the rest of your life you need it. That's another interesting thing too. And sorry, in case you can't tell, I think AI it's hilarious. Is it going to change the world? Fuck no. Is it gonna kill us all? What are you talking about? Here's what you got to know about AI. There's a whole field of study called cybernetics. And although cybernetics sounds like it's talking about tech, it's not. It was actually started in World War II talking about artillery, machine guns, and anti-aircraft mine or guns, whatever you call those things. What he was trying to do, the guy who started the field of cybernetics, was he was trying to figure out how feedback loops happen. So basically, his idea was, look, if you're the gunner and you're going to shoot at an airplane, you're going to move your gun to predict where you think the airplane will be when your shell gets up there. But that's going to cause the airplane to know that you're going to move, and he's going to change his trajectory, which is going to cause you to change your trajectory, which is going to cause him to change his. These feedback loops, he was trying to figure out what happens when feedback loops basically, how do they keep moving? And his big kind of conclusion, all of cybernetics can be summed up in one thing: output can never be input. As soon as output becomes input in any of these systems, the signal will collapse. So that's why if you have a microphone next to a speaker, say something into a microphone, comes out the speaker, gets picked back up by the microphone, it cycles, and all of a sudden that whole signal collapses into just sheer noise. It means nothing anymore. Take it to AI. AI is no different than any other system. Output can never be input. Last year, 50% of the internet was AI generated. Where does AI get all of its training data? So already you're starting to see what's called model collapse. The more AI trains on itself, the more the signal is going to start to degrade, and it's going to become more and more and more nonsensical. And the surest way you can tell that a system is starting to collapse is it starts to become really narrow. Like it doesn't matter what you ask it to do or how you ask it. It starts to kind of pump out the same thing again and again and again and again. My guess is you can pick out AI writing like that now. A year ago, a year and a half ago, you probably couldn't. Right now, you can. Why? Because it doesn't matter what you prompt it. It's starting to sound like one thing. You can pick out AI images almost immediately. Why? Because they all look like they're piss yellow. No one knows why, but the whole AI generation, image generation, has somehow shifted into the yellow spectrum, and it's narrowing onto yellow. They think in about 5 years, it will only pump out yellow pictures, and no one knows why it's doing that, except for cybernetics just feeding itself. So take that back to creativity. Another research, a group of researchers were doing creativity research, and they said the same thing. They said kids with AI came up with more answers, showed more creativity than kids without AI. But the kids with AI all had the exact same answers. The kids without AI had more originality. Why would they all have the same answers? Because it doesn't matter what you're doing with it, it's going to start to collapse in on itself. So believe it or not, for all this fuss and hubbub, I genuinely think in 5 to 10 years, you're going to watch these models just collapse. And they're going to be really good at like one thing. And then all of this debate and talk about AI is basically going to be dead because the system itself will have crashed itself. It moved too fast. And the second more AI data went on the internet than human data, it's inevitable. It will collapse itself. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy 100 years, well, 80 years of science now coming to bear on AI. It's going to happen.
I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, but maybe before we open it up to questions, so people can start to kind of formulate any questions that they have, and we'll just have people raise their hands with the Zoom feature. But to try to end this part of it on a more positive note, where do we go from here? Because the back portion of the book is really a call to action. It's like,
Yeah.
here's a toolkit for parents, for educators, for admin. You kind of cover all the bases. How do we take all of this and actually affect change in our community so we're not all just, in the fetal position, like feeling despondent?
No, the good news is, like we were saying earlier, the infrastructure is there. It's not, we don't
Yeah.
have to build anything. We don't have to create anything. We don't have to invent anything. We just have to go back to doing what we were already doing that already works. So I'd say as a parent in your home, first thing you do is you make your home as analog as possible. You buy a printer. Your kid gets homework online, print it out. Your kid gets reading online, print it out. You just buy a printer and get everything onto paper. And then you audit your own tech use too in front of your kids. Is one of the problems we're starting to see is kids see their parents on texts way too much that they start to feel disconnected from them. So they're going to go off and do it themselves. So if we're going to do this, we're in it with our kids as well. By all means, we're not K through 12 students. I am not learning right now. I am producing. So I need tech. My tech just so happens to be in a shack in my backyard. My house is over there. So my daughter never really ever sees me on it. She knows I have a computer. She knows it's a thing, but she never sees me working on it because she just doesn't come out to the shack. It's my shack. So what that's kind of how I've at home decided to
Like
kind of
Ted Kaczynski.
exhibit my Ted Kaczynski shack. That's what my brother says. He's like, ooh, anti-tech and in a shack. I've seen this before.
Heard.
But then when it comes to then pushing back against schools, kind of three things you need. One, you need data. And I can give you data till the cows come home. You need to be able to show numbers and values. It won't change anyone's mind, but you have to have that in your back pocket. Two, you need mechanisms. You have to be able to explain why that data shows what it shows and why it can't show anything else. That's where hopefully this book and what I can help you with comes in, is I can tell you the biological mechanisms by which this data is there. That way people can interpret it, be like, well, I think it means this. I think it means this. Nope. If the brain works like this, it only means that. That's the only choice we have. Then you need a coalition. If you're going at this alone, you will be labeled as a nuisance parent, and it will be very difficult for you to get stuff done. I, I have a card, troublemaker's card. I am the nuisance parent. But even a small coalition of parents doing it together. So if you look at flocking behavior of fish and of birds, all it takes is less than 5% of the entire school to decide to shift, and the whole thing will go with it. So you don't need hundreds of parents, 10 parents, maybe you all go together. That small move is usually enough to kick the cycle going. Now people have to take you seriously. The board will have to listen to you. Teachers will start to reach out to you and say, yeah, we're having this problem. It's that small group, come up with your kind of value laden. And like we were talking about with this meeting, it's not about what you're against, it's about what you're for. And it's how the tool does not align with that. And that's why I always say I'm not against tech. I'm very much for learning. And if this tool doesn't help learning, then it's not a tool that's going to support the value. So make your value statement, and that's where you start to push from there. Tutoring, the biggest benefit you'll ever see from adaptive tutoring is less than 30 minutes per day. So I got no problem with you using adaptive tutors. But the other thing you got to remember is that data typically comes from inside the program. So it's a data point that I'm not 100% convinced is meaningful. So if you do less than 30 minutes of training a day and you explicitly work to transfer those skills. So if you're going to do 10 minutes of Duolingo, you also have to do 10 minutes of practicing with your parents. You're going to do 10 minutes of iReady. You also better do 10 minutes where you're going to take what you learned and your teacher's going to say, can you do it over here? If you don't have that explicit transfer practice, that's where it becomes dangerous. So just let them know that, yeah, it's not a no, it's just there's a way you have to use it to make it work right for you. And it's the short term with transfer practice involved as well. I mean, that's how you lose rigor, first and foremost, is if you don't have an externalized standard, then who cares? If every kid is going to get their own personalized thing, then everyone can graduate year one at completely different levels. That's how you isolate individuals. There's now no collective understanding. There's no collective direction that we're fighting in. That's why we have external standards that you have to raise up to. It can't be an internal standard that's adapted to whatever you're doing. But I hear you too. That's going to bring us to the bigger question of testing culture, which I think is a huge issue. But man, we could do a whole book on just that. So I think you're homing in on a good spot. Is once the tech is diminished, we are still going to have a lot of things in school that we can still play with to say, cool, now, do we really need to test third graders 6 times in a year? Or can we get away with just K through 6? Be a kid. Let's see what the hell happens there. And I don't need to actually measure your ability on anything other than literacy and numeracy. Do you know your letters? Do you know your numbers? Good.
And also what it does to the child's self-confidence. The adaptive nature is it's designed to be always just beyond reach, right? And so a child knows what they know and don't know, essentially. They know they're going to get it wrong. And so they feel that they're not performing on grade level, but not understanding that it's designed to be constantly testing them beyond reach. And that's a big concern of mine.
That's useless. What's the point of, if we all get our own thing, why go to school?
Yeah.
Isn't one of the aspects of school is we are building a social coherence. We are building a collective understanding and identity. We don't do that. Everyone better just get on the internet and get in your own little silos. And, and that's because what else are we supposed to be doing? Efficiency has never been the defining characteristic of learning. Is any parent who's ever homeschooled a kid knows I can make it through a curriculum in 2 months. That's not a problem at all. The problem is depth of learning. What Alpha School can do is, yeah, wickedly quickly get to the next thing, you're good to go. We call that kind of mastery, you're good at it. But that's all what we call surface learning. The vast majority of what we're doing in school is we're pushing into deep learning. Is, yeah, I could get you through math in a week. We're spending a month because a lot of that is going to be spent time you debating with a friend about a topic, trying to apply that over here. How might that change when I bring up this scenario? So that's where you start to see learning isn't just Alpha School, for as much as they're like, we're rebuilding education, they view education as nothing more than a knowledge dump for kids. That has never been what we're doing. That's like the worst understanding of school. And if that's what you want to do, go for it. But trust me, your kids will hate it and they will not come out as strong as people are telling you they're going to come out.
And the grift is real. 404 Media just came out reporting that essentially they just reskinned Conmigo and called it
And
their own.
Conmigo
Yeah, they're
sucked.
charging what, 60 grand a year. I can't even remember what the tuition is, but
And even Saul Khan stopped using Conmigo because he acknowledged. Here's what that's one of my favorite things that people don't know. So Sal Khan comes out with Khan Academy and then Conmigo and Khan. 3 times that guy has promised he's going to revolutionize education. Why we keep listening to him, I don't know. How many more times are people willing to be lied to before we're like, okay, tech is talking? Wah, 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 wah. AI is going to kill us all. Wah, 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 wah. Someone just, that big thing that went viral the other day where it's like, big things happening in AI. Says the guy who runs an AI company. Stop listening to these people. They're not telling us the truth. One of my favorite things about Saul Khan that he only said it once, but Justin Reich actually got the transcript, so he was able to publish it. Most people don't know he opened a brick and mortar school. He was so convinced that Khan Academy and Khan Migo were the future of schooling that he opened a school to prove it. Guess how often they use Khan Academy and now Khan Migo at his brick and mortar school? Less than 30 minutes per week. Why? Because he said once I got actually was in a school, I realized learning is different than just shoving YouTube videos at a kid. There's more to it than that. So when the guy who invented the tool doesn't even touch it, why would we pay 60 grand a year to a school that basically is doing the exact same thing? It doesn't make sense.
It's like whenever
Oh, I know
people
it
are
makes sense because they're going to get rich.
talking about replacing teachers with like robots or whatever. I'm like, I don't think you've ever been in a classroom because that is not, I
Well,
mean, they kill each other.
this is what when outsiders talk about school, they think it is the same as the workplace, and you
Yeah.
just don't remember. As an expert, you forgot what it took to become an expert. And so you're trying to make kids act like you are now. Without that's like when Bill Gates is like, drop out of school like I did, says the guy who made it through Stanford. You forget that the only reason you were able to drop out is because you went through this K through 12 schooling plus, not in spite of it. And that someone was bringing that up the other day. They're like, "Oh, I don't use anything I learned in school." I said, "Cool. Let's do a little experiment. You don't send your kid to K through 12 education. I will send mine. Who do you think is going to come out stronger?" Because even the people who hate it, it's such a Western thing to hate school. You know where they don't hate school? Developing nations. Why? Because that's where they recognize that's it. That's how you grow. That's how you evolve and get and move beyond where we're at now. So for anyone who hates tech, I'm always like, cool. Do you send, or I mean, schools? I'm like, do you send your kid to a school? Why? Oh, I homeschool my kid. What's the second word in homeschool? School. Okay, doesn't matter where you're doing it. Point is, you're doing it. You can't escape this. And no one, for as much as people hate it, they know that it's a system that works. That's why we keep going back to it. The strength of Waldorf usually comes K through six. It's right around six, middle and high school is where Waldorf and Montessori, they start to just even out with everything else because at that stage, you have to adapt to curriculum. You cannot finagle your way through science. You cannot magic your way through calculus. So good Waldorf schools, as they'll get older, will start to become more and more and more structured. That doesn't mean they're going to bring in tech, but you will see structure. A good kind of rule of thumb, how will they measure up? There are three or four schools that I worked with, actually there's a seven now, down in Australia, who one of the things they did is they stopped grading kids. And they still have tests, but the tests are just for the
Mhm.
teachers to figure out what to teach next. But they still have to take standardized tests to get funding from the government. They just never tell any kids how they perform. They don't tell the parents because their school is like, we're not a performance school. We're focused on learning. And the trick is when you focus on learning, performance is easy. Those kids went from the bottom 10% to the top quartile in the nation in 2 years on every standardized test. They don't know it because the principal won't show it to them, but it's because they stopped worrying about the performance and started
Mhm.
focusing on the learning. And now when the performance comes down the pipe, they don't even tell the kids. They show up and go, oh, by the way, we got to take this little test. Well, it's easy. Think about like reading comprehension. So every kid has to take a reading comprehension test. Now there are like 6 or 7 different methods you can use for reading comprehension. Skim it and then look for keywords over here. Read the questions first, then go back. Read one question, find the paragraph. Read one paragraph, jump over here. So we put all those to the test. We got bunches of different groups of kids, put them all to the test. Hands down, one strategy worked so much better for reading comprehension than all the rest that one of my co-authors said we would be morally wrong to teach anything but this strategy to kids. What was that strategy? Read the dang text. That's it. To the kids we told, don't worry about the questions, just read. But it's timed. Don't worry about it. Just read. When they actually read the text and then we asked them questions about the text, they could answer it because they did the dang learning rather than worrying about how I'm going to perform
Mhm.
later. So I'm kind of hinting at here is when we focus on the performance, there's no guarantee a kid will learn. But when you focus on the learning, 100% they're going to be able to perform just fine. So if Waldorf is focused on the learning and in so doing, they're getting rid of a lot of these subtests that a lot of people would be giving their kids, don't
Mhm.
fret. Individual attention for every student is not the gold standard of education. A lot of education, by definition, is collective. The best learning you do is when all 30 kids are all doing the same thing simultaneously. That's so remember, you probably read the book, the chapter on or the discussion on empathy. When a student and a teacher resonate, learning goes up. When two students resonate, learning goes up. So you don't even have to resonate with your teacher. You can resonate with the people around you, and learning starts to go up as well. So when all 30 people are together doing something, you have a much better chance of finding these little pockets of resonance whereby those kids might be a small group over here, might be everyone collectively are going to start to move. So individualized instruction, it was back in the day, Bloom said one-to-one tutoring gives you a two standard deviation growth. Nonsense. That was one of the biggest myths ever perpetrated across, and that's where people say individual instruction matters. Individual instruction has an effect size close to 0.29, about an order of magnitude lower than what he said it was going to be. So it's there, it just doesn't really matter all that much. Beyond that, why does group instruction work so well? Because learning works best when pedagogy is aligned to the content, not the individual learner. When how a teacher teaches fits the content they are teaching, everyone benefits from that, rather than when the teacher tries to differentiate and make sure every kid gets what they need when they need it. There's some easy examples of that. If you think of like tango, if I wanted to teach us all how to tango, I don't care if your preference is visual learning, auditory learning, tactile, olfactory. If you're a smell learner, go for it. Doesn't matter what you are. If we all get up and dance, everyone will learn better. If we're talking about art history, everyone learns better when we look at and analyze a piece of art, rather than the auditory ones, I just describe it to them, and the tactile ones go up and touch it. Doesn't matter. So that's where when you start to recognize that there is a pedagogy that aligns best with each level of content, that's when group-wide learning becomes really important, because we can say, cool, now as a teacher, I don't have to differentiate instruction. We don't have to differentiate the lesson. Where the individualization is going to come in is how you present to me your learning. That might be where I choose to allow personalization. Okay, we've all done our learning. Prove it to me. You want to write an essay? Write an essay. You want to sing a song? Sing a song. You want to dance? Dance. So long as it's proving the learning, do what you got to do. That's where individualization becomes good. When people internalize a set of knowledge and then are allowed to act on it in the way they see fit, rather than getting it in the way they hope it was going to happen. So when we talk about personalization of learning, no, you want personalization of output, possibly. Not all the time, but that might be where you see it. Otherwise, it's not the end all be all that people think it is.
I have a quick follow-up question. So a
Yeah.
lot of the issues that we're hearing from teachers is that they're teaching to multiple different grade levels within a grade level that,
Yeah.
they've got kids who are maybe 3 grade levels behind and those are advanced. And I'm assuming ed tech has sort of exacerbated this issue. But that's where ed tech comes in, is that it allows them to address all of these different learning levels.
And
Um,
what's going to happen, and to be fair, that's been the biggest bugbear. That's teaching that's it. If you've ever been a teacher, you've had that problem. I've got kids way up here, I've got kids way down there. What do I do? We've been tackling that for centuries, if not millennia. The answer isn't give everyone what they need when they need it. Because exactly as you said, all that's going to do is split the divide further. And now the next year, that teacher's got even a wider gap. And now the next one's got even a wider gap. It has never been to now individualize and hit kids where they're at. It's been to recirculate, figure out who needs support. A lot of my attention will go to the kids with support, but I have scaffolds in place for the kids who don't need as much support to do their work as well. We've been doing it for centuries. It's so if tech wants to say that they can help there, cool. Show me the data that you're actually helping bring this class together as opposed to just individualize and push kids further apart. I'll listen. But again, that's where it's like it feels right, right? It feels good. I think my pill should cure cancer. It feels like it should. Prove it. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying put your money where your mouth is and show me that what you're telling me is true. I see that it could, and I always talk about it like the car. Oh, hello, sweetheart. I always talk about it like the car. Like I could imagine some car makers could make this argument that if you popped your car in neutral and pushed it to work, you could use your car to get fit. Sweet, prove it. I see the potential, But unless you demonstrate that that's how people are actually going to use it and that it's going to actually come out the way you tell me it's going to, it's just noise. It's just promise at that stage. And that's where I'd say for most of those things, first thing that should come out of your mouth anytime someone pushes back is, do you have data for that? Because I have data for everything I've just told you. So someone says, well, can't it do this? Go, it could. Do you have data for that? Oh, you don't. So no, it's faith. It's all hope at this stage.
Like the rise of ed tech has in some ways dovetailed with a separate but related issue, which is the collapse of standards. And so it's
Mm,
become this way for us to, just like as a teacher, thinking about this, push kids along on their own path who really shouldn't be pushed along. Like you simply have not passed second grade. And
yeah.
what is, like that is a tough thing, and we should probably grapple with that rather than be like, now you're going to be in fifth grade, still working at a second grade level, and it's fine because you're eternally on your own path. So it feels like the problems that existed maybe in the 90s and 2000 and 2010, like during the sort of No Child Left Behind era, it's not like there was this utopia of education. We had issues, but instead of addressing those issues, we've just done this thing where we kind of like sweep them under the rug. And
Yeah.
then at some point, there's a group of kids that just has no skills.
It becomes
And
somebody else's problem. But
right.
that's and you see it across is you can get into any college you want now. Standards to get into college are basically nothing. I couldn't, but my last year at University of Melbourne, they flat out said you are not allowed to fail kids anymore. And someone just wrote a paper in the Harvard Gazette this morning saying, what are we doing with grade inflation? Everyone at Harvard is getting A's now. What's the point? And that's so
Mhm.
it's across the board. Is rigor is gone, and I think
Yeah.
we've exactly that. We just kind of swept it under the rug to keep this whole system kind of moving. When
Yeah.
yeah, we can go back if we just do even 2 months of remediation. I can get a second grader to fourth grade.
Right.
Maybe that's where if you don't can't afford a one-on-one remediation, maybe that is where AI comes in. There
Yeah.
is evidence that it can help with learning disorder remediation. Just what's the structure we're going to use to do it?
If you haven't gotten a copy of the book, I really recommend it. It's structured in this super helpful way. I mean, there's literally like a handbook built into the book to do this kind of work, whether you're a teacher, a parent, an administrator. So it's just a super helpful resource to have as you start to organize your community and push back against some of this stuff. And thank you so much, Jared. This was amazing.
No, thank you. You all have a great day ahead.